Hello Internet, Paper Duck here, back with another installment of me just mindlessly rambling to myself. Of course, to the gameplay of Brutal Doom yet again. You know, I think Doom is Doom is very interesting as a concept because it has a very simple premise. It just has a bunch of monsters and you just shoot the monsters. That's pretty much all there is to the game. But such a simple premise is just so much fun, and I think that's why it still holds up all these years, because in all honesty, I always valued gameplay over story a lot. That's not to say a good story isn't a bad thing. In fact, if the gameplay is terrible, a great story can be a game's saving grace. But But when it comes down to it, I honestly think gameplay is more important than story because gameplay is what gives a game its replay value. Whereas you can read a book once and then you might read it again in a few more years, but you probably aren't going to immediately start reading a book after you've already read it. Whereas with a video game, if the gameplay loop is fun enough, well, once you go through it, you might want to just, go through it yet again. Ironically, my second favorite game of all time is very heavily story-based, with very little in the gameplay front. My second favorite video game of all time would actually have to be Fallout New Vegas, which has gameplay as arguably its weakest factor. But story is just absolutely phenomenal. But I played Fallout 4 a lot more than I played Fallout New Vegas, which I don't think developers really understand that just because you play a video game more, that doesn't mean you enjoyed that game more. It's all about the experience, quality over quantity, see? I remember playing Morrowind for about 50 hours, but I played Skyrim for so much more than that. But why did I like Oblivion a lot more than I liked Skyrim? Well, simply put, even though I spent less time playing Oblivion, I just had a lot more fun playing it. See, I always preferred Oblivion to Skyrim, and even Morrowind. Morrowind is great, but I could never get past the mechanics. Whereas Oblivion, I think Oblivion finds a good middle ground between Skyrim's, between simplified mechanics, yet not always holding your hand for everything. Plus, I like the fantasy aesthetic of Oblivion, as opposed to Morrowind and Skyrim's more realistic aesthetic. Mechanics-wise, Morrowind I always thought was ridiculous because it played kind of like a D&D game. Your skill level wasn't just your skill level, it was also your chance to hit, which I thought was really ridiculous. Also made bows completely underpowered in that game. I've played Morrowind, but I could never really get behind it because of the mechanics. It was just too RNG-sus. I don't like RNG in video games. Well, okay, I shouldn't say I don't like RNG in video games. I should say I like RNG in video games because I think the randomness can add some flavor, but I don't think randomness works as a core mechanic. Same thing goes for like Dungeons and Dragons and the like. I like the RPG elements of Dungeons and Dragons, but the combat, I would argue, is the worst part because it's just rolling dice and then waiting for your turn to roll dice again. Anyway, I forgot what my first topic was. I wanted to go back to it, but I honestly can't remember. Oh, okay, I remember now. Uh, Story and gameplay versus gameplay in video games. Whenever I say I think story is more important than whenever I okay, sorry, I got mixed up there. Whenever I say I think gameplay is more important than story in video games, pretty much everybody always has to just scream out, "Well, I prefer both." Like I'm just supposed to disagree with that. I am not saying that if it had good story and gameplay, it would be a bad game. Quite the opposite. If it had, of course, if it had both good story and good gameplay, it would be an downright masterpiece. But when it really comes down to it, I think gameplay is more important than story because gameplay is what gives a gameplay its, well, its gameplay, its replay value, I should say. Take a game like Papers, Please, for example. Heavy on story, but its gameplay is pretty boring, and the gameplay is boring by choice. I mean, it's supposed to be artsy. I get that. I'm not saying it's like bad because of the gameplay. It's a good game, but the story is what makes it good. But the problem with it is that it doesn't really have much replay value because of that. I mean, sure, there are branching paths you can take, but once you exhausted all those paths, there's really no point in sticking around. Unless you just want to get a high score on the endless mode. Anyway, back to gameplay. There's a part coming up. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm sorry, I just dead air right now. Here, right here, this secret area right here. I wanted to talk about this because it wasn't until I've played this map so many times, and this is the first time I had ever discovered this secret. Like, and it honestly blew me away because I could have sworn I've 100%ed this map before, but I have not seen this secret area. I'm letting the AI do most of the work here. He's expendable. Checking for enemies. Like I said, this is mostly just unscripted and me just rambling over a bunch of gameplay. Oh, anyone wondering, I've already told you my second favorite game. My favorite game of all time would have to be Doom Eternal. And that's not an exaggeration. I love that game absolutely dearly. It is so much fun to play and has tons of replay value because of it. Although I think they went a little crazy with the story in Doom Eternal. They went a little wacky for my taste. It feels like they they got a good response from Doom 2016, and they took that as the go-ahead to just absolutely go wacko with that. Because they linked Doom Eternal's gameplay. They linked Doom Eternal to the previous three Dooms: Doom 1, Doom 2, and Doom 64. And I think it's really funny that they're just pretending Doom 3 didn't happen. Like, they're just softly putting that away. It's just gone. Goodbye. Anyway, going for the secret exit here. Oh, that's about all the time. I love getting 100% kills in these. Also, why is the par always so low for these maps? I always thought the par was just ridiculously low. Like, are you telling me, like, how would anybody get 2 minutes in that map without already knowing what to do? Anyway, that's all for this installment.